Good day, everybody. Gail Kraft here from the Empowering Process podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of having a conversation with Mie Potter. Mie is someone who is known for her calming and nurturing demeanor. Wait till you meet her. As a past mentor to those in recovery, she has the patience and training to help you uncover your negative habits and replace them with loving rituals that serve you. Whether writing, speaking, coaching, or helping in the community, Mie is devoted to helping you to become more spiritually connected so that you can always find the answers from within and stop feeling alone. We're going to talk to Mie about what spirituality means to her and how that is her calling and how she's serving both you and me. Welcome, Mie. Well, hello, Mie. We are going to talk about who knows what. Definitely spiritual, definitely cosmic, definitely probably get down deep, but welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Well, hey Gail, thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. I love the name of your podcast, and um it's really, so I have just a tiny bit of residual brain stuff from past events, and sometimes I get stuck on names, and it's in the first, let's say, 10 times that I saw the name of your podcast, I could not grasp the name of your podcast. And then finally, I received a notification about this interview, and I saw empowering process. And I was like, that is so incredible, because that's really how I try to live. And most of the people I surround myself try to live is just being in the process, being in the present, and feeling empowered to go out and do what it is that you need to do in your life, right?
Regardless,
Yes.
regardless. And I call it a process because it's not a goal or a
Oh,
destination,
yes,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Right? I tell people all the time, as connected as I am and as enlightened as I am, every day I'm more than the day before,
Mm.
and I'm not walking on water yet. So,
and and the whole thing is, the aspiration is not to walk on water, but just to learn about walking on water, or learn about um, what it is that we're supposed to be doing.
right, and following our own dharma, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's and that changes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, so I noticed that you don't have a name for your company and you don't call yourself something, which is
So
beautiful.
I had a name for my company that I was operating in the past, and I had a terrible accident, and I'm in this complete transformation into what I'm going to be doing next, and I'm
Right.
not sure whether I'm definitely not leaving the name of my company as is, because there is some people who sort of adopted the name of my company. And at the time, I actually didn't have time to legally pursue. And I just decided, you know what, I'm going to let that go. I'm going to let that go and move on to what I'm supposed to be. And then this thing happened, and I had to let everything go because I was in this process of healing. And
Right.
I I am actually just waiting to see what's around the bend, because it might be that for the time being, I'm not operating that company. I'm actually operating within somebody else's
Right.
enterprise, and
Right.
their enterprise is probably evolving to me doing exactly what I want to do. just not my own company, right?
Right. And that's
But
fine.
it's
That's
fine.
fine. I can remember having a client years ago who said, I thought I would be on this path of changing the world. So she thought to do that, she had to be on stage, she had to be a big name. And I said, well, supporting someone who is on that path is still being on the path.
Oh, yeah. And
And she went, oh my God, because I
yeah,
did a lot of that, right? A lot
yeah.
of that kind of work.
Well, back in the days, so for 15 years, I was a stay-at-home mom with my guys. And truly, my main goal every day was to get up and help them to be the best human beings that they could be in that day and going forward. And I was totally fine with that. And then all along, I was doing these things and like as far as personal development things where I was developing myself, but developing myself as a mother, developing myself as a Bible study leader, as a Stephen minister, as a whatever. And I never thought of that as personal goals. I just thought, well, this is how I'm getting out and helping people. And it turns out a lot of what I use in my daily life are skills that I picked up when I was professional volunteering, as I used to say, right? And it wasn't
Yeah,
I and you are changing the world no matter what you do.
right,
You're changing the world, you're changing your world, or you're changing the big world, or whatever. But just you being an actor in the world is changing the world, right?
right, right.
So you
Because
just
your
have to
energy
define what
has
that is.
an
Yes,
impact on the world, and
yes.
it's up to
Positive or
you,
negative.
right, to choose, right,
Right,
how you see the world,
right.
right? And so yeah, I really love that. So I get the in development, the empowering process, like the podcast. So let's talk about the podcast.
Yeah.
Because that it comes from a book that was written probably a decade ago now. Um, and the title of the podcast has not changed in 5 years,
Mm,
but who I talk to and interview has
mm,
dramatically changed.
really? Okay.
Yes, yes. When I first started, I was looking for people who really went through hell. I mean, I would talk to people who were severe drug abusers, alcoholics, sex trafficking, you know, the whole, you name it, the horrors that can go on in this world. And the point being is that they woke up. What was your
Mm,
trigger?
hmm.
And then how have you changed your life in a way that you're now giving back to the world, right? Um, and so that was really fulfilling until the story started to get to be the same stories,
Mm.
right? And how many times can you listen to someone having being married to a narcissist, right? Like I was sitting there thinking, I don't care, right? But it's still their pain, right? And it's still
Absolutely.
someone has to hear that story. So I went through my own, cancer journey,
Mm,
and I stopped the podcast at some point when I was done. I was actually still doing the podcast and things while I was bald and everything else, um, because it wasn't resonating.
mm,
And I just stopped and I said, universe, do I stop it? And the universe said no. I said, do I change it? Yes. But to what? So I did nothing until a dear friend of mine who is a channeler
mm.
called and said, we did a podcast maybe 2 years ago. He goes, I haven't been on your podcast for a while. And I'm like, there you go. So January this year. So it's
Oh,
all about
perfect.
spiritual evolution. It's about
Yeah,
spiritual development. It's about what is happening now, right? And what
yeah,
people are experiencing. And you're experiencing a lot of
oh, yeah,
yes. So let's
yeah,
talk about some of the things that you're feeling and some of the things people you're working with are
yeah.
going through.
So, I mentioned this to you in an email um, when I was inquiring about this podcast on this day. I I was T-boned by a commercially used passenger van, and the driver admitted in the accident report that she just flat out ran a red light. And one of the weird things is I don't remember around the accident at all. I know I was out and I know I was heading back to my place, to pick up an article that I was going to send to um, my granddaughters. But I don't remember what I was out and about doing. I know I was running an errand, but I have no memory of that errand. And I don't remember any of the accident. Don't remember, any of being transported to the hospital, any of that stuff. I was out, and then my son was speaking with me as I was laying in the gurney in pain, right? But the transformation, like the thing is, one of the things that I've gotten to is there were all these clues from the universe, from God, from the divine, that I was wanting to make this big move, this big change about who I work with. And I was beginning to embrace it, but tentatively.
Correct.
And then two, that day, I knew there were things I needed to get done, and I had deliberately stayed where I live and not driven where I was going for Thanksgiving because I wanted to be prepared to have fun with my family on Thanksgiving. And I never actually ended up seeing them for Thanksgiving because I was in the hospital. But I have been going through this series of transitions, and as it happens, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse until you finally get and oh yeah, and I was actually forced into being very much on my own for uh, really. So the initial I couldn't get up and move around was a few months, but then I shrunk my life down, and I was really just having this time of concentrating on God and healing myself and my PT and all that stuff and dealing with the insurance and blah, blah, blah. But what comes out of it is um, I am so much better at embracing the process now, and so much better at um, really being advocates for people to um, hold their boundaries and to have healthy boundaries
Yeah.
and to um, really take care of themselves. So, in a way that and it's not like it's different than I was, but I'm more adamant about it and I'm speaking more boldly about it. So I guess the empowerment, so that's why this whole interview is a great thing, because I'm better at being in the process, and
Mhm.
I'm also better at allowing everyone to have their own process.
Bam. Mhm. Okay, so let's like pause there, folks. This is
Yes.
really important. It is certainly an important lesson for me, that I have to remind myself from time to time that the saying "not my monkey, not my circus"
Yes.
really applies,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm at the point now, sometimes I'll go to say something, and you'll even see it in the meetings that we're in, where I kind of go forward and then I go back because I'm
Mm.
about to say something, and the universe goes, no. Well,
Yeah.
okay, because it's not the time or the place for me to
Right.
interject on their journey.
Yeah. So younger people, I don't even know what generation you call it anymore, but there's this great phrase, stay in your lane.
I love that. Yes,
And
I'll say that. Stay in your lane, bro.
but I don't, it's funny. When my kids were growing up, the phrase that everyone used was like a surfer term of a certain age. And then people my age started adopting it. And I always thought that's so inappropriate. And that I feel like saying stay in your lane is not my age group, but it's just so perfect, right?
Right.
So I usually say the younger people say stay in your lane. So I'm not pretending. What is it called when you're saying, like you're saying something that's not really authentic to you? No. appropriate for your age, whatever. But
Oh, that's a judgment that you can get rid of.
yeah, but actually, it's, and you're right. But here's the really interesting thing. Um, and it's interesting that you reflected that to me, because as I'm working on being catching my judgment of other people, I judge myself, right? Because we do that. But I, so, but the other thing that is all about being in living your life just uh what's the word, a different word for process. So living your life as it comes and appreciating the journey is the equally important thing of embracing that most of us were raised that we were supposed to aim for perfection, and we weren't perfect. So we grew up hearing everything that we weren't doing right.
Right? Because it's not
And
perfect.
the very interesting thing that I had an epiphany about very recently is we all talk about how we are raised to notice the negative. Not raised. We all talk about how we're biologically programmed to notice the negative, the threats, right? The things that are, and life is much more safe. So things are not necessarily threats. Well, if you reflect to thinking about how you were raised, how could they have done it any differently? Right? Because that's how we're biologically programmed. And you have to make so many steps in order to be authentically looking for the positive and authentically praising most of the time and authentically noticing the positive. And so if it doesn't feel authentic, then you're not going to trust it, right? So,
Well, you can't lie to yourself because your subconscious will
or
just
other
check out.
people. Yeah.
Right. Well they absolutely know. But you can have intentions,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? And you can have an intention to change who I am.
Yes.
And I will take today, my intention is to take this small step. Don't try to
Mhm.
take the big leap. You won't do it. You won't succeed,
Yeah.
right? It's just too much of a stretch. I like to use an elastic as an example for people. If you take an elastic and stretch it, and if you want it to be this big, if you stretch it there, it's going to break. And that's it. You're going to break. But if you
Right.
stretch it a little bit and then relax it and stretch it until you feel a certain, and
That's
then
great.
relax,
Mhm.
eventually you stretch it and you stretch it and you stretch.
Yeah.
That's what happens with your comfort circle. You
Yes.
stretch it and you stretch, right? Because so
Yes.
you're stretching your comfort zone. I also tell people do something a little bit scary every day.
Mm.
It's a little bit scary.
Yeah. Well, so I actually last week I did the uh, Dean Graziosi and Tony Robinson Thrive 2025. And I've actually followed them a few years. And so many nuggets, so many good things. And, one way or the other, some people really like them, some people don't like them. And it to me, I watch all the gurus and I watch all the thought leaders, because the really great point that they made is that whatever it is that you're trying to absorb into yourself, what makes you absorb it, like you said, stretch, relax, stretch, relax, stretch, relax. So I listen to people who I think have a message that is worth listening to again and again and again and again. And I
Mhm.
tell myself the same things again and again and again. So eventually it'll become part of the way I'm thinking
Right.
instead of my stinking thinking, right? But here I am. Um, I have actually been on this personal development journey, but we didn't call it back then, right? Um,
Yeah.
since I was a kid,
Yeah.
right?
I started meditating at 21. So yes.
Yeah. So I'm blessed. I was raised in a household I grew up in the Midwest, but both my parents are Asian descent, and my dad was actually from Japan. So I grew up with the ancient culture and the Midwestern culture. And I think it served me well to have exposure to both of them because I try to be very practical and very pragmatic with the woo-woo thinking. And it's
It's
allowed
not
me to live.
woo-woo. It's not, and that is one of the many lies. One of the things that I've discovered, and I think you're definitely, especially after your accident, leaning into, is that this is who we are. This
Oh,
is what
absolutely.
we're
Yeah.
made of.
Yeah.
Carl Sagan, scientist, said we are star stuff. We're
Oh,
made of
yeah.
star stuff.
Yes.
Well, what do you think he's talking about?
Yeah.
Right? Right?
Well, and um, so there's a lot of stuff around Albert Einstein these days, right? And frankly, he was just a man who was super, super smart, and he didn't operate in a vacuum. So for people to say whatever about whatever, he didn't pretend to be perfect. He just walked around and tried to, live his life and do his stuff, right? But he said that looking at the universe and looking at the way things operating, you have to believe in God.
You have to.
So, you know,
Well, and he was a man who, we call it meditation, would
mhm,
just sit there in quiet for hours.
mhm, yeah,
He's sitting under the apple tree. I mean, right? And he was also, I mean, quite frankly, if he was a child in the school system in this day and age, he would be put on drugs.
possibly depending
Yeah,
on the parents. So
yeah, yeah.
I actually, um, my oldest son was sort of like the classic ADHD kind of boy, because that's typical boy, high energy, didn't want to be in school, didn't want to sit still, whatever. But we were blessed that they were in a school where they were each matched by the perfect teacher for them. And there were only, let's say, so it was half day kindergarten. So there weren't actually that many kindergarten teachers. But because the universe and God, because we chose the school system, all that stuff, but he ended up with this great kindergarten teacher who had boys, and he came home and narked on himself that he had to have a sit on the rug moment or whatever, and it was like, so what was that about? And he told me. I said, oh, so I called her the next day and I spoke with her, and she said, the way I handle it is the first few weeks, we just get to know each other and they get to know my rules and they get to know how I like to operate the class. So I usually don't call home to the parents until it's been about a month or so. I said, well, I just want you to know that I'm fully in support of, you making him aware that you're the boss while you're there. But I said, but he came home and told me, and he said, well, that's highly unusual. I'm like, no, that's how I raised them, like
Right. Right,
there's no
because
shame in
honesty
bullying.
is
Yeah.
actually the best. I used to, when I was a parent, I used to say, this child just needs a rope tied around their waist and a rope tied around the tree, and they need to run,
Yes.
right? To burn off the energy, right?
One of my favorite stories I tell about that son is that at the end of the day, I would ask him, so how's your energy? Or do you feel like you're ready to go upstairs and settle down? And half of the evening, he'd say, no, I still have energy. He would go outside and run around the cul-de-sac in the island in the street until he was so tired that he was panting, which we could say 20, 30 times. I mean, even at the end of the day, playing soccer and running around and everything. And then he would be able to go upstairs and take his quiet bath. We would read stories. We had this whole routine, but the whole routine was just because I wanted them to just transition to now it's nighttime. But also for me, it was my great time where we ended our day. And, I got to appreciate just being with them, right?
It's learning. So personal development is about being self-aware,
Mm-hmm.
right? A book that I wrote called Journey to Enlightenment is about the Kabbalah. And the
Mm-hmm.
Kabbalah is the truth about self. right?
Yeah.
And it's not out there because the Kabbalah, studies on the Kabbalah can get really ridiculously complicated, and that's
Mhm.
insane. It's useless for people to do that. You want this understood so that it is applicable, right?
Yes.
So I took,
Accessible. Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
I took the Kabbalah um, prayers that go with each Sephora in the Kabbalah called Pattern on the Trestle Board, and the Tree of Life, which is also the Kabbalah. Right,
Oh, that's interesting because it's also in Mexican folklore,
right, right.
right?
And so your chakras is the Kabbalah. And
Yeah.
so, right, right. So, and I brought it down to a level that is understandable.
Ooh. And tell me the name of this book again.
Journey to Enlightenment. Yeah,
Because, that's what I do. I read all kinds of
right.
books. And when I listen to podcasts or when I'm on a podcast and somebody tells me about their thing, I think if I hear that book, then that means it's time for me to look at it and read it.
Maybe, maybe. But the point being, it's about energy,
Yes.
right? We are energy, and when we become self-aware, that when we start that journey,
Yes.
right? And we're serious about that journey, we have no choice but to end up where you and I are at right now,
Yes.
which is okay. So this, I can talk to God, right? I've just come out of the closet of being a dragon rider. I've been a dragon rider for 10 years. And I'm now saying, yeah, I kind of talk to my dragon, right? I kind of sing with my dragon, right? My dragon is like here with me right now, right?
Yeah.
And when I need comfort, my dragon is the one who comforts me.
Holds the wings around you.
Yes. Yeah,
Envelops
right.
you. It's nice.
And I actually put a post out today and I explained a dragon is an elemental. An elemental is your unicorns, your
Mhm.
spirit guides, right? They exist, but our eyes, our senses cannot pick them up
Now, yeah,
until we tune and get into attunement,
yeah.
right?
So one of the things that so I was born in the year of the dragon, and um, it's funny because some family friends told me years ago that I was a double dragon, and I didn't do a whole lot of investigating about dragons in my past, but I always, since I was a little girl, I knew that I was born in the year of the dragon. So whenever I saw dragons, I always felt like an affinity to the dragon, right? And there's all kinds of different lore around dragons and how they came about. And I'm not how they came about, like where they are, where they were, where they are, all that. And I've actually had conversations with other people who are um, different kinds of prophets and whatever, and they have told me things about dragons. And what comes to me when, and this sort of like directly plays into process, I am aware of these magnificent, powerful creatures that are somewhere in the universe in
It's
different
somewhere.
plane or different levels of consciousness. And my understanding is, and my trust is, that when the dragon needs to be in my presence or when I need to be aware of the dragon, I will. He or
You
she
don't
will
have to make
step
it
in,
happen. Yeah.
and then I then it won't, right? And
So
maybe it'll be, but the whole thing is, it's just like God, they're around and
you know they're there.
to support us.
Yes.
And I trust that. And I'm learning to trust that more and more and more. And so I don't have to, I can just trust that they're there. Just like trusting the presence of our dearly departed people, and knowing that doing what they need to do for their fulfillment. And if I need them, I can call them in and they're here to be for me. It's interesting. I'm going to show you what I printed out this um, a few years ago. I was focusing on creating a space near my um, near where I sleep, where I have things that comfort me. I don't call it a prayer altar. It's just
The
it's a
sacred space.
sanctuary.
Sacred space. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not because I don't believe. My prayer is more. Um, you're just always praying, right?
Always. You're
And
communicating. You're communicating all the time.
yes, and so, but for some people, they have a prayer room, and it's just about how you structure yourself, how
Hmm.
you need to structure yourself. And so I'm trying to um, whittle down the things that are the triggers that help me to be in my state, in my best state, because I'm part of this whole transformation process is actually shedding of things, right? So, and
It has to be shedding of things.
that's like why I'm identifying with being a phoenix, because you go through all these iterations,
Hmm.
and it seems to me that the best iterations that come about for me is when you go through this, right?
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the
Yeah.
shadow of death.
Yes,
Right?
and that psalm. So I told you I was a Bible study leader, and
That was my prayer as a child.
oh yeah, Psalm 23. Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, and um, my sister sent me Max Lucado's study on Psalm 23, and it's called Traveling Light. And at the time she sent it to me, and she sent it to me because they were studying it in BFS. Yeah, Bible, uh, BSF. At any rate, so she sent me the book, and I read it at that time, and I read it again another time. But now I fully am, like you said, how it was your prayer when you were a child. I'm
Well, that's
fully,
who I am.
yes, I'm fully embracing being aware of that as a guide, right?
Yeah.
Because when we were raising our kids, our
Oh, honey, you just froze.
as I get older, I'm like, yeah, we have the manual. It's all the sacred books, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. However, and what this is what I like about Bible studies and honestly in Judaism, they do the same thing. They
Yes.
don't take the words at face value. They sit
Right.
down and they talk about what does this mean,
Yes.
right? Not the rhetoric. What does this mean?
Yeah.
And that's what Journey to Enlightenment is. It's not the rhetoric. It's what does
Yeah.
this mean?
Well, so as a Bible study leader, so I was trained in this notion that you're a facilitator. You don't have to know everything.
Right.
Collectively, you all discuss the Bible together. And the common catchphrase that we use as facilitators is applying the Bible to today. What does this bring up for today? What is the situation today? And there's all the there's all the mirrors from the Bible, right?
It's Aesop's fables,
Yes. Yes.
right? And whether and I believe some of what is in there actually did happen,
Sure.
but the purpose of the tale is for
Right.
us to learn something
Yes.
from it,
Reflect. Yeah.
right? And we learn by things coming out of us, right? Socrates said education is bringing out what's already there, not cramming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our education system is as is rhetoric, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why it doesn't sit well, why it is programming, it is not
Yeah.
pure, right? When we talk about being authentic, it is what it resonates for you.
Mm-hmm.
And resonates for you in pure alignment with source, not resonate with you in ego alignment,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? People will say, well, murderers are, well, they're egoically aligned. They're not godly aligned. And so they're miswired. They're miswired, right? They're
Because
still
of the pain.
they're still looking for love.
Oh,
They're still looking
absolutely.
to be seen. That's
Right.
what we're all looking for.
Yeah.
See me.
So one of the um out of this last Lenten season, so I usually do I follow a Lenten book, even by myself. And one of my favorite is Bonhoeffer's God is on the Cross. This year I tried a few and it just wasn't making me sing. It wasn't making my soul sing. So I thought, I guess I'm just gonna go through this Lenten season and see what is up. And so then we had Holy Week. And on Thursday of Holy Week, I read something. I was reading something and it was spiritual writing. I don't even remember the writing anymore, but what the phrase was, oh, I was reflecting on a thing that a prophet who I had had a conversation with years ago told me about a particular political person. And he said, well, God loves him too. I was like, and I didn't hear that in the same way I heard it on that Thursday. I really got it. Like, it is
Yeah.
not my place
Yes.
to judge anybody and their actions. I can not like what they're doing. I cannot condone what they're doing. But it is not my place to be in judgment of them because I'm not the judge, right? And
So my favorite
realize that he
saying
loves them.
from Carl Cease is,
Yeah.
"I allow you to hate me, and I love you still."
Oh
I
yeah.
allow you. So I allow you to be, and we're back to what we were talking about at the beginning, giving people permission to walk their walk
Yeah.
without us interfering, because it's
Yeah.
not our journey,
Yeah.
right?
And you know what? And it's interesting to me because when you said permission, so permission has this thing attached to it that can be negative or positive, but it's really, my sister told me this one time. She said, give it to God. And she
Yeah,
said, I want you to visualize putting your hands and just handing it to God. So that's permission, right?
right,
That's permission in the purest form, right?
right.
And yeah, it's just,
It's not condoning.
yeah,
It's
but
yes,
it's like, it's just releasing it, right?
yeah.
And so I've had, this health journey or whatever. And at the first like major thing that happened, I released my son's, plural, fate to God because I might not be around to raise them. And, it was this realist, and it was always the case that I might not be around to raise them, right? Because
Always,
you don't know day to day whether you're going to be here or not, right?
right.
But I really had this awareness that because of this, I have a brain disease. And because of this, I truly might not be there to raise them. And I said, God, they're yours, in my head. And that, but I also knew that they would turn out okay no matter what, because I released them to God. And it was so freeing for me being their mother. It's not there weren't moments when, I didn't get caught up into the, how are they going to turn out, right? But for the most part, I was really aware that God had them, and that they were going to be incredible human beings because God had them. What We're all going to be incredible human beings because God has it, but we have to release ourselves to God too, right? And that's very hard.
Well,
It's tough for me.
it's very hard for ego. It takes working, and quite honestly, Mia, it takes community.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
right? It takes support. It's not something I know I didn't do it on my own.
Yeah.
I worked for decades, and I always had a leader. I always had a mentor. I always had someone that I was leaning on for guidance and support,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes stepping back and realizing, well, that was okay up to this point, but not anymore, right? It's time for something new,
Yeah, yeah.
something different, right?
Yes. Sure.
Um, and so whether you believe in God or not isn't the point. The
Hmm.
point is we are star stuff.
Hmm.
We are a consciousness with or without this body.
Hmm.
And we have the ability to tap into the consciousness from which we originated from, whatever you want to call that,
Right.
and talk to and communicate and get guidance from the masters, from
Hmm.
the master, by the
Hmm.
way, which is me. I created me. I chose to create this soul. I chose to carve a piece of energy out of the God space
Mm.
and come down and pick up programming and beliefs and whatever along the way and form a blueprint of my life to be here to experience something that I can't experience from the fourth dimension on,
Mm.
right? I I can't experience anger, sadness, fear, shame, guilt. I can't experience pain, none of that stuff. And it's in the energy. When I experience it, I create an energy. What happens when I create a rift in the energy? I expand the energy field. That's what we're here for.
Hmm.
We're not here to identify with the energy, to own it, and to become enmeshed in it. We're here to experience it, expand it, and then get ready for the next experience. Right? When I was able to own that, I was able to step up as a spiritual guide in a way that is phenomenal
Mm.
because I'm able to help people own it for themselves.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting how we are guided to whatever experience is our next experience or our current experience.
Right, right.
I've been getting a lot of who I want to work with at this point in my life are people around the recovery space, but it's not really about recovery. It's um, substance abuse recovery, but it's more about what causes you to the damage to you and helping you to heal your damage to go on. So it's looking like veterans, it's looking like people who've experienced human trafficking, it's looking like children who've,
Been sexually abused, molested by their
yes, and
father, uncle,
but it's
whatever.
also like that mistreatment of their soul has led them to abusing themselves with
Right,
substances, right?
right.
Um, so it's uh, there's actually a local rehab place that has just started appearing in my Facebook feed, and they've been around for a while, but I've also been sort of recovering myself and healing, right?
Hmm.
And suddenly, the last few days, it's now right in my face. And so I responded to a thing and they sent me a Facebook message and I sent them my phone number and I said, this is what I've done in the past and I'm in the middle of transforming and reach out to me when you feel moved to reach out to me because maybe I'll be ready to help you again. Right.
Right.
So I actually don't drive at this moment and it's because of a balance issue.
Mm.
So I figure when it's time when I can get around more easily, then somebody from that center will reach out to me and I'll figure out how it is I'm going to work with them.
Oh, there'll be transportation. One of the things that happened to me during chemo
Mm.
Was I learned to, number one, respond to the gifts from God,
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
right, and number two, um, ask for help,
Yeah.
right?
So um the reason why this center has attracted to me is their approach is more gentle
Hmm.
and and I haven't even investigated them yet, but I was working with a different system and they are wildly successful. And like and they have the statistics to demonstrate that people who go through this system, there's a very low rate of you
Backsliding, backsliding. Yeah.
and there's also a very low rate of ending up dying from overdosing, right?
Yep.
But um, the I'm looking for a system where grace is more um, front and center.
Yeah. I don't think blame and shame have a place in recovery. I think
So
people do enough of that to
yeah,
themselves.
so it's not how can I? It's not that the uh, it's not that the program is about blame and shame. It's not,
Okay, good.
and they go through the process that um, integrates the Christian 12 step
Hmm.
and it helps it but every program is perfectly designed for somebody.
Right.
And so
But not
this
for
is a
everybody.
program that is right for people who really need this particular thing to find God again
Hmm.
and forgive themselves, right? And then there's this other program that's for people who need to find God in a different way.
Well, there's more than one road to Mecca.
Yeah. And
Right.
there are those people, it was pointed out to me by a gentleman who has been in recovery now for probably 40 years, that sometimes you find your recovery and it isn't about God, it's about the natural order of things, right? And so everybody has to find their thing, right? Or they
And the
do.
natural order of things is God.
Yeah. But some people don't
But
say
right, right. I mean, um,
it's
I've
just
done
the
some
natural
work with
process.
people because I don't use the word God. I use, the universe, I
Yeah.
use energy, I use, whatever,
Yeah.
because I personally, and this is my own personal opinion, folks, so this is my perspective, and it's whether it's true or not doesn't matter, is that um, there's this consciousness that we come from,
Mhm.
and someone gave it a name one time and called it God, and then humans personified that,
Yes.
right? It's like what Abraham Hicks. It's
Hmm.
it's Abraham. It's not a person, Abraham. It is the
Right.
universe she's talking to, but she gave it a name so people could relate to
Right.
it.
But but like who the people who are your audience are the people who want to hear your language.
Exactly.
And I'm
Exactly. That there is no right or wrong.
right. I use God because it's the word that I can use where people understand what I mean.
Right.
I run into people a lot because of the word that I use who are much more fundamental in their application of that word.
Hmm.
And they tell me what I'm thinking is not correct.
Well,
Well, and it's
that's not correct either.
right. But that's the thing is, I can listen to that and it doesn't wound me
Right.
anymore. When
Right.
I was younger, it wounded me, but that was because I was younger, right? Or not as evolved. Now I can take and my language is usually we all have our own understanding of God because we have our personal relationship. And for some people, they're all good with that statement. And I completely, and there's some people who are more um, literal in their translation of who God is. And I actually, it's the whole thing is like you send them with love and you give them love because that's who their
And
God is.
honestly, Mie, they're right. And
Oh,
you're right
gosh.
because there is no right or wrong. There
Exactly.
is perception and
Yeah.
there is alignment,
Yeah.
right? And that's
And
where it is. That's where it is.
right.
So if people wanted to get in touch with you, honey, and they wanted to know more about you, how would they do that?
Um, I'll be very honest with you right now. I don't have a huge presence right now because I'm evolving who I am, truly.
Mhm.
Uh, but my name is on the screen and lowercase at gmail.com.
Okay. And I will put that in the show notes.
But
So
I
that
will be, um, it's funny because initially I thought, I'm not really ready to do podcast interviews or whatever, but I thought nobody's ever ready, right? And we're always in transition, so whatever.
right. And the fact that you're in process, there are other people who are in process,
Absolutely, yeah,
right? And right. And there's some people who will say, I know exactly where she is and exactly where she's going. I want to hook up with her.
yeah. Well,
Right.
and truly, everybody who my whole thing is sometimes I help people because they end up being my client. And at the moment, that's not the case. But sometimes I help people because we have a 30-minute conversation and it touches something in their mind that takes them to a different place. Right. And yeah. And I do a Facebook Live every Thursday evening. And it's just on my personal page. And it's only friends of friends who get to see it. And people tell me, well, you should whatever. And like, no, it's not for everyone. It's just for the people who are my friends.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Friends, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's how I started. So everybody, thank you so much for listening to the Empowering Process podcast.
And thank you
It,
for inviting me.
oh, you are welcome. And if you like this, please do give us a thumbs up. If you have questions, put them in the comments. If you know someone who might resonate with this conversation, share it out to them. And as always, always, please do subscribe so you know when the next episode is available. Mie, thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming.
This has been a delight.
It's been
Be well.
fantastic. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.